It has been months since Acolyte got canceled by Disney after its terrible reception, awful audience score, and miserable ratings. Let's not get it twisted. The reason this show was canceled was because no one actually watched it. Certainly not enough people to justify its $200 million price tag. Yet somehow Disney Star Wars fans and or shills are so stupid that they continue to be convinced somehow, some way that it was a massive success. Case in point, the big reveal today that has a lot of Disney Star Wars fans who maybe the reason they're still Disney Star Wars fans because their IQs are so low. However, it has a lot of them convinced that that's exactly the case. How could anyone ever cancel this show? The Acolyte was the second most viewed series on Disney Plus in 2024 with over 2.7 billion minutes viewed. Wow, holy shit. That sounds crazy. The second most viewed on a whole streaming service? That's wild. The Acolyte was Disney Plus' second best performing original series in 2024, says Star Wars The Direct Cosmic Marvel. Star Wars The Acolyte was the number 2 show on Disney Plus, original show on Disney Plus in 2024, with over 2.7 billion minutes viewed. Holy fuck, that's crazy. And I mean, you can see what a lot of Disney Star Wars fans are saying. I will never understand why they didn't make a season 2. Just reduce the budget this time. Make sure it didn't go over. It was one of their most viewed shows of the year. Only canceled because of these right-wing Star Wars YouTube channels. They called it DEI and terrible. Was it Andor level of writing? No, but it was fun and gave us arguably the best lightsaber fight in the entirety of Star Wars. That is disrespectful as fuck, Charlotte. How dare you? Pablo Picasso Escobar, it was one of the better Star Wars shows. Better than Skeleton Crew and everything else Disney recently released, except for Andor. Bring it back! And even Daniel Jose Older tried to imply that, I thought no one watched it. I thought no one watched this show. Ironically enough, what they're sourcing, right, what all these things are sourcing is a Deadline article right here from a Luminate report. Luminate is much like Nielsen, a viewership ratings metric service. Broadcast was surprisingly resilient in 2024 amid production declines, but streaming still leads the pack. Fool me once led TV last year, Luminate says. What these dumb, retarded motherfuckers don't understand is in this same report that is outlining how, yes, indeed, The Acolyte was the second most streamed original on Disney Plus this year that was released. It goes out of its way to tell you what a miserable failure not only Disney Plus has been, but specifically Star Wars and specifically this show. Now, what you won't find unless you actually go to the report is when they tell you how many projects they actually put out on each streaming service. And it was a bad year for Disney. Bad in terms of they barely put out anything because this platform is failing for them. It is losing money for them. They're not putting anything out on Disney Plus. In fact, when you look at what they put out in 2024, only nine premieres for them, as opposed to Hulu, which had 46, Max, which had 32, Paramount had 33, Peacock had 36, Prime Video had 42, Apple TV had 36, Netflix had a whopping 146. But the funniest thing is when you actually get down to it and they start talking about Disney Plus and they start talking about Star Wars, they lay out the reality, the truth, the fact that despite it being the second tallest midget, despite it being the second smartest retard, that The Acolyte truly was a ratings disaster. It talks about streaming franchises struggling to regain momentum. It talks about Marvel. It talks about Rings of Power decline. And then they get right into Star Wars. This is The Acolyte spot on this huge report from Luminate. The one that people are claiming shows it's such a massive success. How could they possibly cancel it? I was told no one watched it. It's true. Nobody watched this shit. The Force is not with the Star Wars franchise. Despite a promising start, it really wasn't that promising once we actually looked at the numbers. You guys understand that. Star Wars series The Acolyte was canceled by Disney and Lucasfilm shortly after its first season finale. While mixed fan reactions were certainly a factor, viewership for the show had waned with significant decreases after the first 2 episodes and into the finale. And Star Wars Skeleton Crew hasn't fared much better with only one live-action Star Wars series set for 2025 and/or Season 2. Disney should consider retooling its strategy to address the franchise's diminishing returns. And it shows the declining numbers for The Acolyte. The fact that after 2.3 million people tuned into the premiere. That one, they lost about 500, 700,000 people between the first episode and the second episode, even though they premiered at the same fucking time, down to the finale, which got fewer than 1 million people tuning in. They are shitting on the Acolyte. They are telling you it's terrible. They are saying the Force is not with the Star Wars franchise. They are proving why Disney canceled this in this report. But a lot of dumb people, because they just see this and think it means something, say, oh, wow, isn't that amazing? Well, no, not when you compare it to anything else. The Acolyte, even when compared to Ahsoka. Now, they only compare the first 5 weeks. Why? Because Ahsoka fell off like a rock after the 5th episode, right? After the ridiculous Anakin jangling keys bullshit that they did. Right? Ahsoka did not do well in the ratings, significantly worse than its predecessor. Till Acolyte came out, it was the worst in terms of ratings for Star Wars as it went on. But then they show this. You want to know the reason why it was number 2? Because Disney Plus released virtually nothing of note this year because they are a failing streaming service. Percy Jackson and the Olympians was the number 1 stream thing for Disney Plus that they released. And that even got released very late in 2023, continued releasing into early 2024. Then The Acolyte, then Agatha All Along, and then Echo, both of which were miserable, catastrophic ratings failures. Now, when you want to take into their lower budgets, at least they weren't as horrific failures as something like Acolyte when you factor in the budget that it cost. But come on, what are we talking about here? Behind that was X-Men 97, an animated show. Star Wars The Bad Batch, an animated show. And then Star Wars Skeleton Crew to round out the bottom. Now, I don't think all of Skeleton Crew had been released in 2024, released right at the end of 2024 and into 2025. So you can take that as you will. That probably would have bounced Star Wars The Bad Batch, at least, if the whole thing had been released. But this is why it's number 2. Because they didn't release anything that succeeded. They didn't release anything of note. Percy Jackson and the Olympians was the most successful thing they released last year. Not a Star Wars show, not a Marvel show. The things that had to compete with were dog shit. That's why The Acolyte is number 2. And even with that, the report goes out of its way to tell you what a miserable failure The Acolyte and all of Disney Star Wars truly is. But I know we have to explain this to Disney Star Wars fans. We understand they have a disability. They're at a handicap. That's why they're still hanging on to the Disney Star Wars franchise. This is who Star Wars is made for at this point. That's Dave Filoni's target audience, to be honest. The people that clap anytime Filoni's attached to something. Pretty low IQ in general, if I had to guess. But this is the reality. It's my pleasure to help you out, Disney Star Wars fans, because clearly you just don't get it, and you never will get it, that this thing sucked, it was a failure, and that's why it was canceled. Not because a couple people made fun of it online. No. From a ratings perspective, nobody watched it, and it failed.